This is hilarious looking back. You're like, hey Jam, my question isn't on the game specifically, but I've been meaning to ask you this, which is interesting because, well, actually, if you've heard the Charles interview, then maybe that's why you thought that. Because I'm like, how did you know? That's what I was trying to understand. Like, what could I have said in that post? So you said this isn't about.
Yeah,
That makes
I
sense
wonder.
now. Because the question you said, my question isn't on the game specifically, but I've been meaning to ask you this. So I must have made a post asking people to tell me something they want. You know, because you said it's not about mine. So I must have asked something like that.
Oh yeah, it was like just yeah. What's your yeah? People should ask a question about Mons. People were like, "What's the best Greninja set?" And then I was
Right.
like, "Yeah, here's my life story."
So this is gonna take you back. Because it says, "Hey Jam, my question isn't on the game specifically. I've been meaning to ask you this. What's up, guys? This is Mr. Jamvet, and today we are back for another episode of On the Contrary. We got a special one today. If you are a guy out there that's struggling with connecting with people, connecting with the opposite sex, this is going to be the one for you. If you're a guy out there that's like, man, I use games as a means to escape my problems, this is a one for you. The story is incredible. This is one. I, I'm just gonna get into it. It's definitely something you want to stay around for, and you're gonna see very early in the video why that was. This guy went from his own words, uh, masturbating 9 hours a day to now having complete emotional control, and I wouldn't quite say having his way with the women quite yet, but he's definitely on the path from what I've heard. So, massive transformation. I mean, just if this doesn't get you going from where you are in the depths of where you are, like I don't know what will. But yeah, so we have Tristan on today, and Tristan, I want to start with
Hey,
where how'd you get into Mons real quick? How'd you find out about the channel? And how'd you end up getting to the point where you're like, okay, something needs to change?
um, Mons was like always a very small thing for me. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I growing up, I always played the competitive games. Like I was really obsessed with getting good at something. Like I had to prove myself, to prove
Mm-hmm.
something to myself, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just went from game to game.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I found a game, I tried to get good at it. And then I kind of gave up when it got hard, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't remember when I started playing Mons. Like obviously I played the games as a kid. And then eventually I just watched like Joey and Blunder.
Mm-hmm.
And like I probably found your channel that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
And
usually what
from
people
there,
say.
like it would be because I had trouble like falling asleep for a while.
Yeah.
And it would be just the stuff that I put on to fall asleep to, but I never really, I don't know, I got like I played some ladder at some points, but never really all that much.
Mm. Okay.
It was just the stuff that I put on to fall asleep to.
Okay. Like any Showdown live that's going on.
Oh yeah, I just put on Blunder and CTC saying dumb shit, and I I just fall asleep.
Okay. Okay, cool. So you'd fall asleep to those, and then so I remember, just to kind of fast forward. I remember this is around the period of, if this was last, because this you reached out in February. Um,
Yeah.
so this, I'm trying to think the state of mind I was in around that time. I knew I was gonna launch. I knew I was transitioning more into working with, and for those who don't know, offline. This psychology is my world, which is why you hear it bleed into my content so much. I always say that the game is just a vessel for the person. So in every community, if you look at Blunder or CTC, and they're very entertainment focused, screwing around. That's because that's a heavy part of his personality offline. Like, and I've hung out with CTC. Like, I actually visited Blunder and CTC last year, um,
Hmm.
and it was a good time. So, offline, they're very much like that. I won't go into the details. And you
Okay.
know, Joey saw Joey out there too. He's very much like that. So you take the BKCs, like a lot of people's offline interests and personalities bleed through the game. And so for me, I'm very, I'm very passionate about, or what I dislike the most is seeing young men in particular, men in general, but I say young meaning ages 20 to between 19 or 20 to like 35 ish range. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
just live a life of mediocrity where there's nothing to look forward to every day. They're not doing that much that they're like, man, I'm really contributing to the world in a way I give a damn about. And so offline, I realized that was a massive, massive pool of people. And so over time, I realized like, oh, because I'd get these messages when the academy was around of just like, hey, Jam, I'm struggling with this, and I'm struggling with porn, I'm struggling with family issues, and I just dropped out of
Yeah.
university. What do I do? Like, it would be things that I'm like, how do they know I can answer this? And so behind the scenes, I would have these really long conversations with people and help them out of their situation, and I really found an enjoyment for that. And then it was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, maybe the guy is offline. Like, there are real people behind these avatars. So I got more interested in how can I weave into something everybody's already doing, which was Mons, the things that
Yeah.
they need to hear anyway, right? If you're struggling and you're depressed and you're lonely, like, how could I use something you're already using to escape your pain to be the thing that helps you escape? And so around that time, I was making community posts about, it wasn't full on, it wasn't like fully out of the closet, like, hey guys, I'm really trying to help y'all, just actually have better lives in general. It was more kind of dripped into the Mon stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
so people would say, oh, this kind of reminds me of my actual life, or this reminds me of, that was very intentional, extremely intentional, but I
Yeah, I
didn't
think you,
want,
you just
go ahead.
back then you just used to leave like a lot of little hints.
Right. Extremely
And I think that's
intentional.
why I messaged you, because I messaged you about Mons, like it was some strategy Mons post.
Uh-huh.
And then I kind of knew from the hints that you could help me out. And I put a message, and eventually we got connected.
Exactly. And what happened after that was insane. I mean, I can't wait to get into the story because I'm hearing the details first myself for the audience. So yeah, so at that moment, what was, I don't know if you remember the exact post, but what about it for you being in the situation you were? Please describe where you were mentally, emotionally, and how you got there, like a brief story of how you got there, and what made that post go like, okay, I'm gonna take action on this versus just letting it go by like everyone else.
Yeah, well, I don't know what pushed me to actually comment
Mm-hmm.
exactly. I was in my bed. I was feeling probably slightly negative mood,
Right.
and or probably very negative mood actually.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know. I was just like, yeah, fuck it. Let me write down this stuff.
Mm-hmm. And what
But
what
yeah,
led to the
as
negative
as,
mood?
as yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna get into that.
Okay.
So back then I was 20, yeah, 25,
Mm-hmm.
and I just had like a, well, this is hard. I don't know where to begin. Uh, I always had a hard time with girls growing up,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can think of like one experience when I was 14
Mm-hmm.
where I used to like a girl, and then she didn't go out with me, and one of my friends told me, "Oh, like she would never go out with you because
Mm-hmm.
you're not a cool guy." Because I was always this gifted kid, glasses, front row, straight
Mm-hmm.
A's, and yeah, I think when my friend told me that back then, I just kind of, it got stored in is somewhere in my body,
Mhm.
and I just internalized it. And I just had this feeling in my chest my whole life that like girls aren't for me.
Mhm. So,
And
so the thing that friend said, you took it and went, "Oh, okay, it must be right because she didn't go out with me." So, like,
Mhm.
my type of guy who's straight A student, glasses, into games, and girls don't like those kind of guys.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I just kind of took it as like something in me just cannot work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just after that it just never worked out with any girl.
Mm-hmm.
Like never ever. And
Did you have opportunities, or do you just like close yourself
oh,
out?
I had opportunities, and then I would either avoid them or just do nothing.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Meaning the women would
Um,
make it known, or you'd like be sitting next to someone you want to talk to and you just wouldn't do it.
yeah.
Which one was it? Was it more of like
Oh,
that like somebody would say, "Hey, I'm interested," and then you'd like avoid it, or
oh
was
no,
it
no, not that
okay,
clearly.
just hints?
Just hints, yeah.
But you were like, "Nah," or did you know but you were too scared to do it?
Oh, I did not know.
Okay, that's
I definitely did not think I was attractive to anyone.
okay.
Um, but yeah, so I grew up, and when I turned 22,
Mm-hmm.
um, I won a big tournament in Yu-Gi-Oh.
Mm-hmm.
I won nationals,
Mm-hmm.
and in Yu-Gi-Oh, we do these things where when you win a tournament, you do a deck profile. So
Mm-hmm.
you show off the cards that you played and you explain your card choices.
Mm-hmm.
And from that video, some girl messaged me and she said she was very interested in me.
Video from on YouTube, or is, what do you mean?
Oh yeah, it was on YouTube.
Okay.
And it was like, I had no idea that that was like even possible.
The girl being interested, or the girl being real?
Both. Yeah, so at first, obviously, I thought it was really weird. I thought it was probably somebody trying to scam me or
Of
something.
course, of course.
Um, yeah, and then I don't really know exactly how much I should share about that story, but
Up to you.
okay, we started texting a lot because
Mm-hmm.
she didn't live nearby. She lived like in a different city,
Mm-hmm.
and so one day we arranged to meet,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember I was very very afraid. Like I was
Of
so
course.
afraid.
Had you seen her? Had you seen her on FaceTime and all? Like, had you confirmed
No, no,
this was a woman or a
I,
real
li-
person?
I confirmed because she was related to my brother's girlfriend at the time.
Just coincidentally.
No, she was probably my brother shared the video with her his
Ah,
girlfriend, and
okay,
she
okay,
saw it instead of me.
okay, okay. You were very nervous.
I was extremely nervous. I just locked myself in my room, and yeah, and eventually I got out, and we were playing like it was I think it was my brother's girlfriend's birthday.
Mm-hmm.
So we were, drinking and playing games. And eventually, my brother and his girlfriend went upstairs, and it was just like me and this girl left in the living room.
So wait, did the did you meet her before this happened, or were you
No, the first time I've ever seen her in my life.
okay? But you guys hung out like you when you were meeting up. You were meeting up with your brother and his girlfriend too.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
What happened?
And eventually she started saying shit like, "Oh, I've never had an orgasm." And
How old was she?
I'm like, she was like 19.
Okay.
I was 22.
Okay.
And I don't know. I was doubly scared because I had never kissed a girl before. You know, because
Right.
it's just
I get it.
I'm in there and like I never kissed a girl before, and now she wants an orgasm. What?
You're like, slow down. Way too many steps. Right.
But yeah, eventually, so we got on the couch, started making out and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and she mentioned that she was on her period. I did
Mm-hmm.
not know what that meant,
Mm-hmm.
to be honest,
Right.
and I got even scared, even more scared.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened is essentially, we like didn't have sex,
Mm-hmm.
and mostly because I was scared.
Mm-hmm.
And then okay, the next day she left,
You said
and
you guys didn't have. Were you expecting to? This is your first time meeting her, right? Not, obviously people can sleep together at any point, but like you said it as if you were like that was something you were expecting. So was it a thing you were expecting to happen and it didn't happen, or like why'd you say it like that?
yeah, I guess it's not that clear, huh? Um, because we did throughout the making out, there was a lot of talk about fucking,
Okay, okay, got you.
but
Was that
eventually,
was you were bringing
I
that
did
up?
not. Sorry.
You were bringing that up. Was it like I'm trying to get more clarity?
Oh no, I was not the one bringing that up. I was basically scared, but she was bringing
Oh,
it up a lot, and I was scared.
okay, that makes more because I'm like you're just starting to kiss for the first time. Now you're like I was like okay, Tristan, you're jumping from just leaps and bounds. I was like okay, that makes more
Yeah, but
sense.
it was very obvious that this girl had a lot more experience than me.
Okay.
Um, and essentially, okay, she left the next day, and I was still very, very scared. You know, didn't interact with her very much,
Mm-hmm.
and one day she texted me that she slept with somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really, really painful
Mm-hmm.
back then. You know, like I don't really know how to explain it. It's like very, very painful.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's mm, like so in the moment when it happened, I felt
Mm-hmm.
bad, but like not super bad.
Mm-hmm.
Then I called her. I like quote unquote broke up with her, even though like we weren't really a couple. It was like that whole thing of like it was painful because it's like also, oh, I cheated on you, but we weren't really a couple, so that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like extra layer of like shame.
So that's what she said to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm not being very clear, because I've told this story a million times, and I feel
No,
like
it's
I'm
fine.
just retelling it again.
It's fine. It's fine. I'll get the. It's more.
And I just know the ins and outs so well, and like I
Exactly.
also want to like since it's very intimate and it involves other people, I just don't want to
I
say too
understand.
much stuff either.
We can I was just trying to get the general idea that way the audience can follow like they can the core touch points of like okay boom 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 because sometimes
But
when
essentially, yeah.
mhm,
So that happens, and the next day I collapse on the bathroom floor crying, and I just
Mhm.
cannot stop.
Mhm.
And that went on for like literal years. Like I had moments throughout the day where I
Mhm.
would just start crying, and I could not stop myself.
Mhm. Why do you think that was?
I don't know. I I did not know it was possible to experience something that painful.
Hmm.
And as a means of dealing with it, I would play either masturbate or play video games.
Mhm. Normal. Yeah, pretty normal.
And obviously, like not obviously, but I was definitely like thinking about uh, harming myself.
Mhm. Yes. I
And
guess it's actually
like,
more common than you know, but yeah, go ahead.
oh no, yeah. I think that's common.
Yeah.
Anyway, um, so in a way, the coping mechanisms were like obviously not good, but at
Mhm.
the end of the day, like they literally kept me alive.
Right.
So kind of strange.
So prior to this situation with this girl, were you ever in a state where you were thinking about harming yourself, where you were in this negative state? Like, did that start after the girl, or was it kind of already there? But then,
Never anywhere near that degree.
hmm. So what were you like prior to that? Were you like a generally happy guy? Were you like neutral? Were you
No, no, no.
sad?
I wasn't. I I just had like very, very low control over my emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't really. Yeah, I felt generally pretty negative usually.
Okay. So it's not like you were, you went from 10 out of 10 blissful happiness to like despair. It was just that it intensified it a lot more after
Yeah,
the.
because so basically I was like, oh, girls aren't for me. I'm sad. And
Mhm.
then this happened, and I was like, oh, maybe girls are for you. And it was
Ah.
like, no, fuck no, it's not.
Oh, so there was
You know
a
what I mean?
like a ray of hope moment where you're like, okay, and you felt like you may have either messed up your one opportunity or something like that, and then life is
Yes,
just
yes,
over.
definitely,
Okay.
definitely.
So at this point, you're thinking, dang, like I'm gonna be alone forever.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Um, so a couple of years go by. It was COVID, and I just stayed in my mom's like basement pretty much
Mm-hmm.
for 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you were the
Um,
stereotype, the jokes about the basement dweller. You're like, oh yeah, dang, that was actually me for a second.
that was actually me, yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was just like very, very fragile emotionally. Like
Yeah.
I could not, like literally I would break down at the smallest thing. And if I needed the coping mechanisms to like not cry as much. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like just very violent crises of crying. Like
Mm-hmm.
so if I started crying, like you ever seen a kid in a toy store where
Mm-hmm.
the parent refuses to buy the toy and they start like on the ground
Yeah.
rolling around?
Yeah.
That's what I was doing when I like was having the crisis.
Really? It was that intense.
Yeah, I would kick my feet, and it was and I could not stop crying until I was too tired to cry.
Interesting. And this was like almost every day, if not every day, at least
Oh,
once.
every day
Oh
for
wow.
like a year and a half, 2 years.
Hmm. So how were you looking at yourself around this time then? Because I mean, I can imagine this being new for you. Your parents probably like, I don't know what, like I can't understand what's happening. Like what was your perception of yourself, and how was that changing over like this time? You also don't understand why it's happening either. Um,
Yeah. Well, my parents definitely had no idea what was going on. I never cried in front of people. I always cried like
Okay.
alone in my room.
Okay.
Like maybe there were a couple of times where I did, but like most of the time it would just be I would lock myself in my room and cry.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could feel it coming. Like there were a lot of like small triggers. Like let's say I just walk around in the street and I see a couple, like it would trigger me, and
Mm-hmm.
I would maybe like start crying and shit. Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so that stuff would happen, and it's pretty like awful to live with. Um, but I still like I wanted to get better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so you were
You know,
so
I
you were
like
go ahead.
yeah. Go ahead.
I was asking, were you
I
still
booked
playing games around this time? That's what I was trying to understand. Like,
Oh
so
yeah, I was definitely playing games. Like a lot of games.
okay.
So usually it would need to be like some sort of like deep like passion or interest.
Mm-hmm.
So like let's say there's like a game I'm playing. I want to do like really good at this game. I'm gonna play this game the whole time
Mm-hmm.
because I want to do good.
Mm.
Or it would just be masturbate. Masturbate is like easy because like you don't need that driving passion because it's like kind of there by default.
Right. You just turn on a screen and look at attractive women and then just or whatever fantasies and it's just pleasure. Right. That's common because what draws most guys to games, right? Because I mean, as a male, uh, even pre-game, pre-video games, there are always things men would seek. Like men instinctually seek a way to be useful, right? And we also seek a way to be not the lowest on the totem pole, so to speak. So it's wired in a male in a way that is not in a female to seek to climb a hierarchy, right? We want to be the best or one of the best at something. Um, and
Mhm.
and so video games satisfy that need because we're not going to war in most countries. Typically, we're not, like those traditional sort of you know like obvious ways of being useful aren't as clearly demonstrated in
Mhm.
Western culture as they used to be. Like you're pretty much for most young men, they're under their parents' wing till they're like 24, right? So, how do you ever go like, okay, like how do I prove my usefulness if my parents are always taking care of me? Or if I know if shit hits the fan, my parent like now obviously this doesn't apply for everyone. Right. And so
Mhm.
sometimes, guys find that sense of usefulness in, okay, like can I get really good at a game or can I get really good at attracting women or can I get really good at being fit, right? These are all sort of upgrades to your character where it's like, okay, I'm less fat or I'm more muscular. You know, I'm not alone. Like somebody likes me, or sometimes it's in the career field, like I'm making more money. And so these are all versions of like upgrading our character that's very unique to males, right? We need that. It's not just nice to have in the way. I'm not saying it's not just it's just nice to have for a woman. It's just not the same wiring. And so that's important to understand for guys because sometimes, you think your desire to climb the ladder is just arbitrary or even
Mhm.
insignificant, but it's not. Everybody's trying to climb a ladder. The lawyer who's trying to he's already making $500,000 a year and,
Yeah.
another $250,000 is not going to make that drastic of a difference. But he's just that drive in a male to be for status. I want to be the top of the totem pole. Like we don't like just being the lowest on the like the lowest status guy in the room, more or less.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. And at that time, I definitely had some of that.
mhm,
But the main thing was like I needed some like sort of screen to between me and the suffering.
mhm, mm. And how did you go about achieving that? You think?
having the screen between me and the suffering.
So you're saying that the games were more to avoid the pain than to improve. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
I think so because yeah, I think so. So as I was going to say before you started talking, I never I always wanted to get better, get my life better. Like I definitely knew that like you're not supposed to cry every fucking day of your life. Uh, and I would try to go to the therapist like by myself, like just actually book the stuff myself.
Yeah.
And I would like I would say the name of the girl and like start breaking down, and I could not like get it out. So that went on for like 2 years.
Meaning the therapy or the breaking down
the crying. The crying, and then there were like a couple of points of therapy in there, but like it never really worked out.
Okay.
And eventually, my parents were like, "What the fuck do we do?" You know.
Right.
Well, my dad's always been very absent, and they divorced early, and my mom was like, she didn't know what to do.
Right.
And she was dealing with a lot of her own problems at that time as well.
Of course.
But she somehow she found this this woman who's like not a traditional therapist, but I think I told you about this. She's so in France we call it a magnetizer. I don't know how you'd call it in the US, but essentially the act that she performs is she puts her hands on top of your body because you're laying down flat on the table.
Yeah.
She puts her hands on top of your body, never touches you. And she just looks at the way that your chakras are like moving or whatever, and she rearranges it.
Okay. Did you notice any changes from that?
So it took a while, but one thing also is like the session would always start with like a lot of talking, so it was kind of like therapy in that sense. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So it would be started with like some sort of therapy session, and she would like do the thing, and I was always very skeptical of it.
Of course.
That it would actually help me out, and it took a lot of sessions before I could actually like talk about what was happening to me. It's what was different from going to a regular therapist is that after the therapist, I would always like break down and cry after the session, and with that woman, I wouldn't. I would feel pretty good afterwards.
So was it? So you were discussing the same things, and then she would do the energetic work to you while she's talking to you, or was it just like after the talking, do the work, and then
after the talking, yeah.
But then you'd notice like when you're literally leaving, or do you mean like when you go home by yourself, you wouldn't break down and cry?
After the session, I wouldn't break down and cry like I did with a regular therapist.
Which would be like at the actual office, you wouldn't break down, not when you got home and was by yourself.
What I'm saying is after the session, when I got home,
okay, that's what I was.
I did cry. I did cry after a regular therapy session, and I wouldn't dare.
Okay, so when you got home from the magnetizer session, you would not cry at home.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was trying to I didn't know if you were crying on site or when you got home. Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Okay.
And eventually, throughout the sessions, and it took like months, I got to like tell the story, you know? another human being. That was like very nice.
Mm-hmm.
And I also started feeling good enough that what I forgot to mention is like when I was 22, I also had just dropped out from university.
Mm.
And in France, it's not as punishing as in the US because you're not in debt.
Right.
Because school is almost free.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that time, after meeting the magnetizer a few times, I was able to stop crying as much. It would still happen, like once every 3 days instead of every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to sign back up for university the next year.
Okay. Mm.
And there was a year of school where things were getting better, but they still weren't, like, I wasn't feeling good at all. I would like frequently break down in public transport. I
Mm.
would have a hard time going to class, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Okay.
And when we got to exams, my mom tried to commit suicide the week of the exams,
Oh, man.
and I kind of like didn't go through with the exams, and I didn't get the year.
Was this after you went back the second time, or is that the first time you dropped out?
That's the second time
Okay.
when I went back.
Okay. And so when that happened, I mean, was this close to around when you was this way before you responded to the post, or was this like around that time? Like, what was?
That's like a year before still.
Okay.
So after that, the next year, I finally went back to school, and at the time I was doing better, like a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't cry as much at all. Like that it kind of finally stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And that year, so the second year after I got back to university, in February, I did write back to your post.
Okay. So around that time, you're starting to, or you're still seeing the magnetizer around the time.
Oh yeah, I was seeing her the whole time.
Okay. So you had noticed changes. You weren't crying as much. The crying slowly started decreasing. And so at that point, I made the post. Again, I cannot remember what that was about. Um, and then for some reason, you were laying in your bed, given all the things. I mean, the childhood thing, the girl, the family issues, like all the pain. And fortunately, you were subscribed for whatever reason, and happened to be happened to be looking at your phone at that time. That post, you come across it, and you're like, huh. So walk me through Tristan's head, as because that just doesn't sound like something you'd have done in the past. So yeah, what's going on with that? Especially since you were seeing the magnetizer, like, so you were making some progress. So
I was definitely making some progress, yeah.
right. So what was the walk me through Tristan's mind, and what made you follow through? Because I'm sure you had skepticism and all these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think I started feeling good enough that I would like reach out to people and like telling that story, the one with the girl.
Yeah.
That became easier and easier, and like I would just be able to tell the story without like completely breaking down.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at the time I was still struggling a lot with girls.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could not. It was just a big source of pain for me.
Right.
And I didn't know how to fix it, and that's the way that I was thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's a problem you got to fix. And then I remember I signed up for a writing workshop at university
Mm-hmm.
where you get to talk about stuff like that, and I started doing other things. And I remember at the time of the writing workshop, that's when I messaged you, when I was like just ready. I was just ready to start like asking around for help, basically.
Specifically when it came to women.
Yeah.
Okay. And I have I have where our message thread is on Discord, so I can give a bit more context, so I can like scroll back up because this is a pivotal moment in the story. Okay, I have it right here. It was actually the end of January. He said, "Hey man, I wrote this. Hey man, I wrote this long ass YouTube comment the other day. I figured I'd reach out. I was curious what you had to say, and I could find it right now actually, but I won't because it'll take too much time. Your YouTube name was Sup Bitch. This is hilarious looking back. You're like, hey Jam, my question isn't on the game specifically, but I've been meaning to ask you this, which is interesting because, well, actually, if you've heard the Charles interview, then maybe that's why you thought that. Because I'm like, how did you know? That's where I was trying to understand, like, what could I have said in that post? So you said this isn't about.
Yeah.
That makes
I
sense
wonder.
now. Because the question you said, my question isn't on the game specifically, but I've been meaning to ask you this. So I must have made a post asking people to tell me something they want. Because you said it's not about Mons, so I must have asked something like that.
Oh yeah, it was like just yeah. People should ask a question about Mons. People were like, "What's the best Greninja set?" And then I was
Right.
like, "Yeah, here's my life story."
So this is gonna take you back, because it says, "Hey Jam, my question isn't on the game specifically. I've been meaning to ask you this. I've been playing games competitively for a while now. I'm 25, and Mons has never been at the forefront for me. This competitive scene on Smogon is so small, and I never got into VGC. Still, I've followed the game since Gen 6, playing periodically because I find the game fun and enjoy strategy it involves. Enjoy the strategy it involves. I've been having a really hard time emotionally since late 2019. I started my first relationship and it ended kind of abruptly at the time, and I felt very depressed for literal years. And it's given the audience so much context. I paused my
Yeah, this
studies.
is like,
I cried
uh-huh.
almost every day, and I felt like I couldn't leave my room. And I pulled up distractions to avoid the emotional pain I found when I looked within myself. I mean, you seemed very self-aware at this point, so I can tell the magnetizer or whatever you were like.
Oh,
This,
I had made a ton of progress, right?
yeah, I'm like, holy shit! Like, this is almost dead on. Uh, I had a big competitive spirit before that time. I saw some major success in one specific game I cared about winning a lot, which is Yu-Gi-Oh, and I knew which methods to
Uh-huh.
apply to ensure success. Ever since, it has felt like that drive to win became kind of senseless. That by trying to win so hard, I was only finding a way to feed my own ego, and didn't really make much sense beyond that. Today, when I go to tournaments, I don't really care about winning that much. I don't get upset if I lose. Seeing my name on the top of the standings isn't as rewarding. I still enjoy the game, but the result is almost meaningless to me. Man, I'm starting to remember reading this post. Like, I remember reading this, like, but because my thing is always on my phone. My current practice with Mons is following. Watch a ton of videos as a distraction, and every now and then I'll hop on the ladder and land around 1600s. I can go higher if I tried, but I don't really care to. Losing to another weak 1600 players, frustrating. Beating them feels like right. I'm back to feeding my ego again. She's right. Here's the thing. I definitely do not want to put in the time to improve at Pokemon. I've been trying to date, which is very difficult for me socially and emotionally. I'm back to my studies and I can't really afford to lose time anymore. That's the key point most guys have to get to. How much more time are you willing to give to not living the life you want? Right? Another month, another year. Like, when is it enough? Enough is enough. And he said,
Mm-hmm.
I try to get work on the side, so I'm not just some money siphoning wormholes to my parents. You were definitely taking writing courses. So here's my question. Given that I will not commit to the practice, should I complete? Yeah, I remember this question vividly. I feel like
Yeah.
the time it takes up could be better spent elsewhere, but the distraction it provides still somehow needed in a way, which makes sense. Basically, what should I do if I play mods, but it doesn't make sense to me? I just wrote this on a whim. I realized it's not exactly digestible, and I think the exercise of typing it out helped me regardless. And then I responded, "What's up, man? I appreciate the transparency, and to give you a better answer, it will take a bit more than a YouTube comment. Shoot me a message on Discord." That sounds like how I usually respond to stuff
Mm-hmm.
like this, because as I
Yeah.
said, most of these were not like, I've had ungodly amounts of these conversations just like that, but they're never public. And I used to think like, okay, well, that's perfect, right? I'm not doing this for glory. And also part of me did not want people to know that I don't know what the motivation was. I guess I just assumed that people wouldn't value, like, it's like, oh, I came here to mindlessly watch you beat people on the ladder, right? Like, I don't, like, my life is perfect. I don't want to know, like, I don't want any
Mm-hmm.
life nuggets in the middle, right? So I think that was my motivation. Nobody cares. So
Yeah.
I would always keep those private, but the more I shared, especially with these podcasts, I get the messages back, yo, I was on the edge, man. And that one episode, you know. And so my goal became just planting the seeds. So we just found that. And so as I'm going through that, I gave you those 13 question thing. And I remember you took forever to do it. Um,
Did I?
yeah, because I remember you're like, oh, it'll take me a couple of days or something. Yep. So he said, all right, I was getting late. We'll be in touch because we were talking about it. And this was the 31st. Follow up. I wrote too long, but I couldn't figure out the format on Discord, but you made it a PDF accessible. So this was 5 days later. And then this was on the 4th. We were going into it. And then, because I remember you take really huge gaps.
Yeah, because it was it was painful for me.
Which makes sense now in hindsight. And then this was 2 days later, and then 3 days later, and then like, oh yeah, that's what.
And also back then I struggled a lot with like texting in general,
Uh,
and like I just like responding to text was like something that was difficult for me.
okay,
So
okay, cool.
that makes sense.
Now I'm getting all the context, and so as I'm looking at this, it's like you need to get to the point where you're sick of. Oh wow, interesting. I had a moment where I said the same thing to you. Um, So I gave you the resistance release. I'm going to bed. Hey, I just wanted to let you know that I'm having a hard time finding a moment where I feel okay being that vulnerable. I cried a lot the past few days. This was the 9th. So we hadn't started measuring the 4th, just 5 days later. Cried a lot the past few days, and I feel like I need some time off crying. Um, I got some stuff planned for the next week. I likely won't be around. Hopefully, we'll be in touch early next week. And then I said, okay, this is good. You need to get to the point where you're sick of where you are now to find the courage to change. I'm confident you will, though it'll be hard in the beginning. That's the last thing I said to you on the 10th. And then you messaged me 10 days later, the 20th. And then you're like, especially what came up is that I'm in denial over the fact that it ended. So you did oh my, I can't believe I gave you a resistance release. And that explains
I don't
so
know.
much.
You gave me a resistance release?
Yeah, you
I don't know.
and you did it. That explains. So I forgot that I had given you that. I didn't know I taught you how to do that. Interesting.
I didn't know I knew how to do that.
Yeah, you did one before because I taught it to Julian, and I know Julian's had you do several. So
Oh yeah, I've done several recently, but no, I don't remember back then.
yeah, I didn't think I named it back then. It was just a tool that I knew would get to the core of the problem. And you actually articulated it really well. You said essentially what I came up with is that I'm in denial over the fact that it ended. Since it ended, because we're too far from each other geographically, I just kept those feelings for her bottled up and never got rid of them. I painted this picture of her in my mind and kept crystallizing it as the most desirable thing possible, maybe out of desperation or insecurity, since she's the only person who has ever made me feel wanted, which goes back to that thing of like, dang, this was my one shot and I fucked it up.
Yep.
Ultimately, I'm still hoping that one day. All right, you were still hoping that you get this girl back. I'm still hoping that one day.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Oh dang, this is bringing back so many like. Oh my god. Ultimately, I'm just having hope that one day I'll have the courage to text her or something to that effect, and she'll want me again. Letting go of the feelings means killing that hope, and I just can't bring myself to do it. Which makes sense, because if you assume she's the only shot you'll ever have at somebody wanting you, it makes sense why you're not thinking, well, I'll just find someone else, because that doesn't seem like an option. Okay. And so also I've been fucking awful since our last conversation, and I've been finding it really hard to stay focused on getting better. I don't know if it's because we hit a difficult point, because I really don't know where I'm going, because I ran out of energy and lost rhythm in something else. I'm really having a hard time, because this was key, because this what we did in the conversation. You know, for guys who don't know how working with me works, I don't do therapy in the way people think about that. Right? It's not like, hey, let's sit around and talk about things for 40 hours for 17 weeks. Right? It's very intensely diving into the core of the problem, releasing the emotional pressure, which is why you said I've been feeling awful since our last conversation, because what you ended up doing was like, as we started to start that process, you'd disappear, because you'd feel like, oh shit, we're hitting a point where, you know, like this particular area I don't want to fully address quite yet, but you went far enough to where the band-aid got ripped off a little bit, and then you're like, oh shit, let me put the band-aid back, but the pain is still there. So
I think that's essentially what the crying was. It was like I had the feelings like bottled up, and every now and then they would come up, and I would like steadily back up, and it would just keep coming up, and that's if you want to stop crying, you gotta let it come up.
You gotta let it. And so I responded, said that's likely because we brought to the conscious awareness things you don't want to admit or acknowledge, which is what you just said. Once that happens, it's hard for you to go back into denial or ignore the issues you had to address, but you also don't want to change. Can you please describe how exactly it's been harder for you to function? And so we started to go into, but basically around that time, I said to you like, hey, I know a guy that I think would be perfect. And around that time, funnily enough, when you messaged me, this is how I know this was divine. When you messaged me, Julian, who you're going to see enter the picture soon, guys. I know it's been a long introduction but I know for the one person this podcast is for, is appreciating all the details right now. So I know this isn't for everybody, but I know there's one guy who's like, yo, this is exactly my life right now. I'm glad somebody else can relate. So around this time, Julian, on my side, Julian for the audience is the guy who worked with Tristan over the next year and took his life from literal zero to hero, right? Like just the absolute monster. So around this time, Julian was like, oh bro, I want to start helping guys, because it took time for me to get him to be open to doing that. He's like, do you know anyone? And so at this time, you had just messaged me. I was like, I might have a guy, but he has to be open to it first. Just give me some time. And so he didn't know, like, it wasn't like I was like, oh bro, it wasn't like he was already doing it. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to recommend you to him. He had before, but it was like he wanted to work with somebody by himself, because I was always helping him. And he was, we were working with people together, like Charles, or, he had worked with one other guy. But, he was like, I want like a real from scratch guy, and I was like, I think I might have somebody that'd be perfect, but you know, and so, but you disappear for years at a time and come back. So like, I have no control over.
Yeah.
So when I finally the next day was like, hey, would you be open to working with someone else? What was your point of view, and share your side of the story of how that all went down?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I was very, very unreliable back then. So like, I would just disappear, or you would just text me and I wouldn't respond.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be like common occurrences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, back then I don't remember at all when you said, "Oh, you're gonna work with someone else." I don't know. I think I was ready. I was down to try.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Just anything at that point was better than what was going on up to that point. So like,
Not really, because it was very easy to keep coping. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting.
So yeah, I don't really remember how I felt, honestly.
Okay, good. All right, so all right then, let's just jump into it then. Because this is the part of the story
So
where shit changes.
yeah, so I got in touch with Julian, as you said, and we talked a lot at the beginning. I remember, and then he was like, "Okay, well, you gotta do stuff. You gotta take action."
Mm-hmm.
And like,
So okay, give the
and
audience
the goal was
give the audience some
sorry.
context as to who Julian is. So like because they don't know, they're like, who's this Julian guy? So just give a bit of context on.
Okay, yeah. So well, I'll tell you what I knew about who Julian was
right.
back then. Julian was like, "Hey, I have a lot of experience with women, and I'm very good with women.
Mm-hmm.
And not only am I very good with women, I also have a wife and a family.
Right.
That's like the top tier."
That does sound like
I mean,
top tier. That's exactly. Oh, go ahead. That's exactly how he talks. That's top tier. He probably did say that. Go ahead. Oh, Julian, if you're watching this, love you, bro. But that's exactly how you sound. Go ahead.
And I was like, I was honestly, I was down. I was like, oh yeah, that does sound like the top tier. And we talked about stuff. I was very resistant about a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then it came to the point where he's like, "Well, you gotta take action." So like, and Julian was very adamant that I like approach people immediately.
Right.
And I was like very resistant to doing that.
Well,
I remember.
I mean, you haven't. Like, when was the last time you even spoke to people? Like, really? Around
I was back in school for like a year and a half, so I was talking to people.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't like round zero. So so you had friends and you were interacting with women around this point?
Barely. Like I had a couple friends. That's it.
But no like female interaction or anything like that.
Like yeah.
Like other than your
just
teacher.
Small talk in class.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay, that kind of thing. Okay. And so what?
And Julian was like, "Oh, mm-hmm. So you're gonna go to the mall and you tell the first girl you see that you want to have sex with her or something."
This is hilarious hearing it from your point of view. This is hilarious hearing it from your point of view. Go ahead.
And I was like, I am not doing that.
Oh man. Oh, okay. Which is fair. 99% of guys can't do that. So I understand. That's like when I went to visit Blunder at CTC. It's a real short story. I'd compare it because we did go out to like,
mm-hmm.
Like because this isn't, sure, we were around like in the apartment screwing around playing Mons, just goofing around, but we were just hanging out like as boys. And so all of them being single at the time, amongst those who do know me offline, everybody comes to me for understanding of the female mind. Like this is a common thing. And so they know that I never share that stuff online because like, it's just, I don't want anything to taint how people see them, right? So it was very similar. And so the first day I was there, like within like 20 minutes, like I had a date set up for the Saturday. I got there on a Wednesday or Friday or Saturday.
Okay.
And so we were chopping it up, talking around, and then I was breaking down and showing them some stuff, and I had to use something they can relate to, and this has been a running meme ever since. Where it's like,
Okay.
I was like, you see, y'all's understanding of women right now. You're like a 1300 player. You know what I'm saying? You're like a 1300. I was half joking, but I wasn't at the same time. Because when you're 1300, 1400, you're far from the bottom. But
yeah, oh yeah.
But you're miles.
I was in 1300. I would have loved to be 1300.
Right? When you're just starting to play, that seems like 1400. I mean, like, whoa, right? But it's so far from the top that it's not even funny. And so what I was joking with them was saying is like, bros, you're like 1400, solid 1500 level. Like y'all aren't, virgins or anything. You had a few experiences, And so when you guys run into, because they were describing situations, I was like, oh, that's 1500 stuff, right? I was like, oh, when you get to because when you see a 1700 player, which would be the equivalent of a guy having like 3 girls or something, it'd be like, all right, bro, that's 1700 stuff. There guys out here, and this is where the running joke came. There are 2100 sharks out there that will scoop up your little 2100, representing like the top of the ladder. Like to get to 2000s is crazy, but you have like rare times where a player will be on such a groove they get to 2100, which is very rare. And so there's like 2000 level sharks, 2100 level, but that will take your points in this situation, obviously representing their girl. And that'll take your points. And so ever since, whenever I'd see them, I'm like, man, there are 2100 sharks out, and I'd send them like on the iPhone like a shark emoji. I literally had a convo with Blunder recently about something like that, and he just busted out laughing. He was like, no, the sharks are coming. So
the sharks are gonna take my girl.
Right, the sharks are coming. And so I say that because when Julian's like, hey bro, you're like a 1000 level player, and he's trying to have you do like 2100 shark, like go up to a girl and bring her home that day and give her organ, like whoa, slow down. So when he said that, I was just laughing in my head because I remember him bringing that up to me. I was like, that's way too big of a jump. Like, huh? You're asking him to triple switch when he doesn't even know that water is weak to grass. Like, so
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah. So that was it. I was like, I'm not doing that, and I think so. Julian was like definitely like very openly trying to figure out how to help.
Yeah.
You're just like, you're patient zero, and I'm just like trying, like you're a test subject basically. Right. And so okay, he was like, okay, well, if you won't do that, well, what will you do?
Good question.
And I remember the first, and this was at a time where like I could not go to like a clothing store by myself.
Right.
Like,
what was the reason? What was the reason?
I just cared too much about people's opinions, and like I was very sensitive, and
okay.
I just felt like people were looking at me, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. What were you worried?
So,
what were you worried they would see at that point?
I don't know. What was I worried? I don't know. I think I cared a lot in my ego. I cared a lot about being seen as somebody competent.
Ah, okay.
And since I don't know about if I'm walking a clothing store, I've never like bought clothes before.
I got
At
you.
that time, I'm like, I just don't know how it works. So I remember when I started going to the gym later, way later in the story.
Mm-hmm.
That's also what I cared about. What was hard for me was not being there and being like the skinniest guy in the gym. What
Mm-hmm.
was hard was like not knowing how to operate the machine and having people see me
Mm.
not being able to operate the machine.
Mm. Interesting. I never really think about stuff like that. Interesting. That's an excellent point. Good. But I'm listening. Excellent point.
Um, so yeah. So the first kind of actions were not me walking up to girls into a mall and asking them to have sex with me. It was like you're just like, okay, well, what you're gonna do is you're gonna go to the mall and like say anything to a girl.
Right. And how did that go?
So as that was my mission, I realized like that going to the clothing store is like impossible. Like, it's fucking hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I forced myself to go to the clothing store, and I would get Julian gave me like a lot of little tips of just ways to control your emotions better.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, like you're probably not going to die if you go to the clothing store.
Right.
Just like you're not going to die if you tell a girl you want to have sex with her.
Right.
That's what you want. But
Right. You know that now, but I can understand why in the beginning.
But yeah. So clothing store would this kind of tips were like, well, you should take deep breaths, like literal stuff like that to let
Mm-hmm.
you control your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you're struggling to talk to women, maybe you should like talk to a guy, like you just say hi to the next guy you see. Maybe that's easier,
Mm-hmm.
and it gets you more comfortable. Maybe just smile at people, and if they smile back, you feel validated. That kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Literally like ground land. This is so incredible because what I loved about you working with Julian, it was that I was like, well, like, why did I have you work with Julian instead of training you myself? Well, one, I had too many clients, so I couldn't take you on full on unless like you were a paid client. But I could tell that
Mm-hmm.
the alignment was too perfect. Julian, Julian, uh, wanted someone, and I could tell like you would be perfect. I literally remember thinking, if he can help you, like avoidant, because at the time you were like super avoidant, it would take forever to respond. So I was like,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure.
I love helping guys as much as the next guy, but when it's 10 days later, right after the conversation, I'm like, I can.
Yeah.
What if this after this convo is 10 days later again? You know, on my end, the time investment, and this is in the midst of like 5, 6 other people messaging me that day, and this is all
Yeah.
free. So I'm like, well, you know, this just feels right. But also, what you were just saying with the nitty gritty, it's been a long time since I've had to train somebody from the ground up, like meaning like literal deeper, like all the things that I had to learn when I was around like 19, 18, when I was really mastering the stuff. Because I had a couple years stints of like going from deathly afraid to approaching women to like obsessing about all of it and just mastering it. So like I remember that stuff vividly, but it's been so long. I was like, you know what, Julian is looking for somebody to reveal to him, as he said, an experiment, right? It's like he's like, can I do this? And it's like, okay. And so hearing you describe him sharing with you is like, right, like that is important. Like it is important to, beyond the actual technical skills, like the social anxiety in and of itself needs to be resolved before any of the women stuff come into play.
Yeah. That was also a great source of suffering for me, was that I could not like I was always scared in social situations, and I was like, just like women aside, that was still like a big thing that I wanted to solve.
Right. 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 It's just a big aha moment as you were saying that. It's like, right, duh.
Especially in terms of like my values at the time.
Yeah.
Like I always cared, like I always grew up my mother telling me that like money isn't all that and that people are more important.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always cared a lot about like making connections with people
Mm-hmm.
more than I cared about any sort of monetary value.
Right.
And sometimes I could not like function socially enough just to make a connection with someone, which is something that I cared about.
Right.
And so that was a source of pain for sure.
Right. Mm. Right.
Yeah, I barely remember that. That's funny. Anyway,
Yeah.
so I walked into the clothing store. Boom, did it. It was very hard.
So how long did you do it
I
the
did.
first shot, or did it take some time before you did it?
I did it the first time.
Okay. Meaning you just walked in and walked out? Did you speak to anyone?
I think some guy said hi to me. I was hoping that like nobody would see me, and some guy said hi to me, like the salesman said hi to me, and I felt like, oh, I didn't die. He said hi to me, and I did. Wow. Oh, hold on, 1 sec. I gotta be right back.
You're good. You're good. So you're saying that you didn't die magically? You know, clothing stores are the number one places of death in France. So I'm surprised you managed to survive.
Yeah, and I lived. Wow. And also, that I remember that same day, I asked the woman where the bathroom was.
Whoa. Whoa. You can laugh about this now, but that's real. Like I remember similar times where it's like one of my, which is called, this is called aversion therapy, which is, you know, gradually exposing yourself to something and like at the smallest amount until you can handle it and just gradually building it up. But I remember asking people for the time, like, because I'm not better than anybody else. That's why I can relate passionately to. That's why when you said that post, I was like, "Yo, DM me, bro." Like, I'm willing to invest that time because I just don't want any guy to be stuck in that place, feeling like there's no way out. And so I had to go on the, like, I remember going on the street like, oh shit, do you not? It wasn't time, it was direction. Because time, like, we have an iPhone, we have phones, like, you know, everybody knows the
time. Time doesn't really work anymore.
Right. But it was like, oh, do you know how to, like, I think it went from anybody directions to women specifically to, like, you know, obviously, but like this was real, like, so yeah. I relate strongly to where you're coming from, but go ahead.
Yeah, so it went from walking into the clothing store to anything to women, and then it was like you have to tell a girl that she's attractive, or no, it was not telling the girl specifically that she's attractive. It was like a compliment an article of clothing.
Okay.
So I would walk around and be like, "Oh, I like your scarf," that kind of thing. And so I did that and eventually it was like, you got to do 10 today. And then, so it would just ramp up in intensity, and then eventually there was like one girl who reacted like negatively to what I said.
Yeah.
Like it was like, oh, I like her glasses, and she was like, yeah, fuck off. And I felt bad.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I did something wrong.
Right.
Like morally wrong.
What was that?
I was just thinking like, oh, you know, I'm just bothering her because she's a woman, and that's not fair. And in doing that, I'm part of the problem, and
What problem?
Well, I think it goes to some like feminist rhetoric, right?
Oh, meaning like the problem of you're somehow like
Yeah, men are trash, or like men being like I just didn't think back then that like being a man is okay. I think is part of it.
okay. So like literally having the urge, the desires to see a woman, find her attractive, want to have sex with her, all these things. Felt like there was an inner conflict with your base desires.
Yeah, it was morally a problem, and I think yeah, okay, I'm remembering now.
Mhm.
My mother had a very toxic relationship with my stepdad,
Mhm.
and also my dad was has been handicapped since I was 6,
Yeah.
and I never had any like good male role models.
Right.
So to me, being a man, what it meant being a man was like being like malicious.
Mhm.
Um, how else can you put it? Like, what's another word? Like malicious and
Mhm.
weak, and like try to take advantage of people and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Right? Oh, lazy. Lazy is a big one, and like it's one that you see in a lot of media, and like I think is propagated by society a lot. Is that like men are lazy?
Really? So like you did so
Yeah.
were you thinking that to be a man you were supposed to be lazy too? Or was it like that's just
No, I
how
was
it
like, I don't
is?
want to be a man. I don't want to be a man because
Oh.
being a man means being lazy.
Oh, that's wow, that's insane. Hmm. That's actually really useful. I didn't know that was the male brand got the lazy tag. Very interesting. And where was there a contrast you were seeing with how women were being presented?
What do you mean by that?
Meaning like were women also being presented as lazy? Like what was the brand that you got when you thought of a woman?
I don't really know.
Okay.
I was just, yeah, I was really thinking to myself that there aren't any differences.
Okay, between a male and a female.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. But differences in what sense? Because if you think a man is lazy, you were just thinking like, okay, well, women are lazy too. Just humans are lazy. Like, what was the? I'm trying to understand more from the because you sounded like you were rejecting being a man specifically, but it
Yeah.
didn't sound like you thought women were negative. Does that make sense? Like, it doesn't sound like you were
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
branded like
Yeah.
women were
It's
negative.
not quite fair, is it? Hmm.
So what was your viewpoint on a woman?
It was pretty neutral, I think.
Okay, so it wasn't like it wasn't you weren't being like wherever you learned this you weren't being like spoon fed because I don't know what it's like in France, right? So I'm partly trying to understand, but you weren't being spoon fed um, any narratives like oh women are lazy or women are negative in any way.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, gotcha. All right, that's all I wanted to know. I was like, is this a two-way thing, or was it just a thing where it was male focused? But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But back then, I had so as I was saying, I had that strong like emotional reaction
Mm-hmm.
when this girl rejected me,
Mm-hmm.
and or rejected just my compliment, but
Right.
that's how it felt.
Right.
Um, and and I felt like I did something morally wrong, and I was just like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore.
Right.
And so there were a lot of times when working with Julian where we just wouldn't make any progress because I wouldn't do what he wanted me to do.
Mm-hmm. You had resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. And so, how did you overcome that stuff?
Yeah, so after that there was a lot of time where we would always talk,
Mm-hmm.
but it wouldn't always amount to any action.
Mm. Mm.
At least on the side of women
Okay. So where were you feeling like you were
specifically.
making progress?
There were a lot of like I started working out.
Okay.
That was actually it was very helpful, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So at first it was like, oh, you gotta do how many push-ups do you think you can do um, until this time tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like I did 100 push-ups a day for like a long time,
Mm-hmm.
like months and months.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually I went to the gym.
Mm. What was that process for you? Was it a similar thing to going to the was it a similar thing to going to the this clothing store?
Yeah, I mean, part of it, yes, but also um, like I didn't like my body.
Mm-hmm.
I was always very skinny,
Yeah.
and so at one time I said to Julian, like, I feel like I'm like in the body of a literal child,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, well, that's not okay, and you have the power to change that, so let's do it.
Right. It's true. I mean, what can I say? Right. You do. Right. Okay. And
Yeah, so that happened, and so yeah, I felt very I felt a lot of guilt, I think, for not making as much progress as I would have liked or as Julian would have liked.
you felt like you were letting him down.
And yeah, and we'd go back and forth a lot, and he would be like, "Well, if you're not going to do what I want you to do, then like there's nothing I can do,"
It's true.
which is fair.
Right.
And I was just like, "Well, I'm not willing to go through the pain that like this requires. So
So did you find
what do I
yourself?
do?"
Did you find yourself relapsing at any point, going back to old ways, and
Oh,
then?
all the time. I mean, a lot of the things on your channel,
Mm-hmm.
I think that you like a lot when it's fast progress.
Right.
Yeah, for me it took a long time. So
Mm.
yeah,
Mm. Okay. But it was you definitely weren't the same guy when you started. Like meaning like
yeah.
the guy that
So I definitely made progress. It was slow progress, and it had to be like much slower.
yeah.
But at the end of the day, like in it was May or June that year,
Mm-hmm.
I played Yu-Gi-Oh! Nationals again,
Mm-hmm.
and I won again. And
Mm-hmm.
that time it felt very different than the first time
How so?
because I had acquired like a lot of emotional resilience at that point,
Right.
and so I could control my emotions like a lot better throughout the games, and it just made a huge difference.
Mm. So what
Especially since I was like the weakest part of my game before.
was the emotional control?
Yeah.
And that's actually if you play any mental game, which is what Yu-Gi-Oh is. It's not like the guy with the biggest muscle wins, right? It's a thinking game, right? The best thinker
Mm-hmm.
wins. And I'm sure there's RNG and Yu-Gi-Oh and whatnot, but just like in Mons, the best thinker. Otherwise, you wouldn't win twice. Like if it was pure luck, like here must be the luckiest guy on earth. So there's skill
Yeah.
aspect, there's strategy, there's thinking required. All those things are a mental martial art. And if you've never heard of what a mental martial art is, just think of physical martial arts. You get good at those to do one thing: defend yourself against people. In mental martial arts, you defend yourself against problems. So physical martial arts train you to be a better fighter. Mental martial arts train you to be a better thinker. Right? So these are things like chess, mons, engineering, right? Things that
Right. Mm.
does it make sense?
Oh yeah, that definitely makes sense.
So Yu-Gi-Oh is one of those.
Um,
And emotional control
yeah,
is necessary. So go
mhm.
ahead. That's why I was pointing that out.
Yeah, yeah. So as I was making incremental progress in those areas,
Hmm.
I wasn't necessarily always making progress with women,
Right.
but I still was making progress. And when it came down to nationals, I was like, "What the fuck? Like, why is this so much easier now
Hmm.
that I can walk into a clothing store?"
Right.
You know?
Right. So was there a critical?
And I remember
You remember what?
I remember messaging Julian like, "What the fuck?" After day one, "What the fuck? I'm 8-0." Next day, "What the fuck? What the fuck? I won."
Must have been
It's
a
like,
crazy feeling.
yeah, because that tournament is fucking hard to win. Yeah, yeah.
You sound like you went in there not even expecting to win.
I I I I called Julian the day before, and I was like, "I'm probably not gonna win. I'm probably not the guy that's the most ready in the room, realistically,
Right.
but I'm gonna do my best."
And you won. Okay, nationals. That's no small thing, right? And so what's interesting is that there was, and this is very common. This is actually how the Mons thing playing into real life actually manifests usually. People don't realize that when you're mastering, because you may think like, okay, well, what kind of game there is it? Are you playing a physical game when you're aiming to get better with women, or are you playing a mental game? Right? People would say, oh, well, no, it has to be physical because but if you actually think about it, it's not. No amount. So physical games, you train your muscles to get better results, or you train your body. You training your body doesn't make you better with women. And so that's not what you're working on. It's not a physical game. Training your body can make you more attractive, but you can be attractive and then you still have to communicate with her. And that's the determining factor. So you were actually playing, getting better with women was actually a cognitive sport, so to speak. And so as you got better at that, and emotional control is one of the things you need, it's like the most important thing for all mental games, all mental martial arts. It translated into Yu-Gi-Oh without you even realizing. So in those moments, it's like, wait, what the fuck? Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. That was a great feeling, obviously. But I remember with the day that I won nationals again. We're celebrating with my friends, and
Right.
it was like amazing. And they're like, "Well, we can do anything you pick, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because it's my day
Right.
essentially." And I remember saying like, "Oh, but it was really hot that day, so I was just like, oh, let's just go back to the B&B and I want to shower.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want the most."
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that day crying in the shower
Mm-hmm.
because I had gotten the nationals title back,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not what I wanted. I wanted my girlfriend back,
Right.
and I remember crying like in the shower that day.
Right. Because that was around when the last, like, that's what started the whole thing, right?
What do you mean?
Wasn't it when you won the first time that she reached out?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so those are connected.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. So I figured that was like, that probably brought up a lot of emotions for you because that was like the beginning of the first, like what you're still thinking is your only shot to having a woman and having love and having connection and being desired.
Yeah, that was very powerful emotionally. I remember one of my friends who saw me go through all those difficulties. When I won again, he broke down in tears in joy. So that was a very nice moment.
So when did you hit that critical point of like, I'm getting this handled, that's it, period? Like, what was that moment for you of like, hell or high water, I am not just gonna give up and lay in my room and masturbate my life away? Like, what was the moment for you? Did you have one of those, or was it just gradual?
There was never a moment,
Okay.
like a specific moment. I don't think I ever gave up hope. That's the biggest thing.
Okay. Was that because of
I
your
was always
combo
like,
with Julian, or was it just within yourself?
oh no, 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 it was way before Julian.
Okay.
I was like, oh, there is. how can I get better? You know.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And so when did things start? You start to notice
There
some
has to be
changes.
a way. There's a small chance that I'm gonna be okay. And it turns out, like, if you look at my situation, like, yeah, I'm okay. It's like completely, like, it's fine.
But it didn't seem like
Like,
that
I wasn't,
in the moment,
yeah.
right?
From the inside, it felt like the worst thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
From the outside, it's just, there is a guy in his 20s who has a roof over his head and food on his table every day. Like, he's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. So when did you notice I guess a breakthrough or progress? Like, because right now you're in the phase of the story where you had a rough
Where
past.
we were stuck. We were stuck on women, and we were stuck for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I won nationals, and then it was always like, oh, you gotta ask for a girl's phone number. And I was like, I'm not doing that, and we went back and forth, and he was like trying to convince me for hours and hours.
Right.
And I was just like, I'm not doing it. Or like I would try to do it and not do it, and feel very guilty afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we like kind of stopped talking because Julian like wasn't seeing a way to make progress, I think.
Right. Right. Makes sense.
And on the first day back to school that year, so in September, October,
Mm-hmm.
I just like the girl who was sitting next to me. I just asked for her phone number, and she gave it to me, and I texted Julian, and
This is after a while of you guys not talking.
yeah,
So what?
like yeah,
Why'd you
we
do
would
it?
talk now and then, but like yeah.
But not like your meetings like you used to have, like not your sessions, right?
No, yeah, we would just talk as friends more so than coaching sessions. Yeah.
And then what made you decide to, or have the courage rather, to ask that girl out this time? What changed? I mean, that's not your usual behavior.
hmm I think there was something like that made it much easier. The fact that it wasn't like a complete stranger in a mall, which is like what I would do before,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that it was like just from the social situation, I'm just already sitting next to her. It makes it much easier.
Mm. So the desire was still there. So why were you not doing it before, and why did you do it then? Like, what changed? The resistance seemed to
I think
left.
also there was this moral resistance that I talked about before, where it felt like it was an okay thing to do there, whereas doing it to a complete stranger felt like inflicting something upon them that it was the moral thing not to do it.
Okay. Mm. I see. That makes sense. So got her number. What next?
So like I went on a date. It wasn't that great.
Mm-hmm.
I like turns out I wasn't that attracted to the girl,
Mm-hmm.
and then there were like a couple of other things like that, like other dates and stuff, that never really panned out.
So you had started getting comfortable asking for girls' numbers now.
Yeah, well, yeah, a little more comfortable. Like I wouldn't say I would do it often, but yeah.
Oh, this is over a couple months.
When basically when I got put in the social situation at school where there's a girl next to me, I felt a lot more comfortable
Mm-hmm.
trying to get involved romantically.
Gotcha. That's pretty normal.
But yeah,
Mm. Okay. And so you started getting a bit more comfortable asking for numbers. Then what?
and there was like a specific girl that I would hang out with all the time, and when I asked her out, she rejected me outright.
Mm-hmm.
and that felt very bad
When you say hang out
because I
with,
remember
what do you mean?
like just talk about school stuff.
So you guys would hang out outside of class?
Hmm. Yeah, like during breaks and stuff.
Okay, got you.
Uh, and um, and Julian was like, you gotta do this thing. You gotta tell her you want to fuck her or whatever he would say.
uh,
and,
oh, you gotta say it accurately because people are thinking like, "Oh my god," that's not exactly how he says it, but I know what you mean because I'm more direct than
no, the
even
way that
Julian.
Julian, so yeah, to do justice to him, what he would say is like, you gotta, what do you actually want with this girl?
Right,
Whatever it is, you gotta tell it to her straight up.
right, which is
That's
true.
it.
Right, which is not what the average guy goes. Hey, I'm going to do everything under the sun except let her know that I'm interested, and then cross my fingers and
Right.
hope that she'll get it, and some version of that, right?
Mm.
So he's basically like, yeah, you don't need to go down that learning curve. I think he was just trying to speed up your learning curve, which he did technically, because you know, in how things I know are going to progress towards the end, I'm sure you're a lot more direct than you used to be. But most guys go through their lives being indirect and crossing their fingers and hope, for the best. When
Yeah.
it's just that's such a 1100 strategy. It's embarrassing, but
Well, I don't think I'm that far above 1100s to be honest, but
you're
well.
probably not. I'm not saying that you're a shark now, but it's he was trying to jump you from 1000 to 1300 without having to like
Mm.
Draco Meteor fairies, right? Is like, don't even waste your time Draco Meteor fairies. But you kind of have to Draco Meteor a couple of fairies to get that. It's not working. Um, and then you're like, okay, maybe I'll use the steel move next time, right? But yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, so it was very hard for me to like, get my feelings out to this specific girl.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did, she rejected me, and that felt bad.
Right.
And for a long time after that, I was like, oh, I give up.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, I am not willing to, like, I'm just not willing to go through the pain
Mm-hmm.
that it means to get rejected. So I'll just like, whatever. Fuck it.
Right. Normal. So when did you overcome that? Because clearly you did.
But I don't even know that I did, to be honest.
Well, otherwise you'd be
um,
stuck there. Are you still in the same place you used to be?
no, I'm not exactly in the same place. Um,
Because you had never even laid with a woman before, right? So you're still a virgin around this time,
yeah.
right? So what? After that rejection, did you never speak to a girl again?
No,
Okay.
that's not how it works.
So what happened?
So I don't remember exactly what Julian was telling me
Mm-hmm.
then. It became more of a like friend to friend relationship that rather than like a coach student relationship.
Right.
But there was a time when we made it like again, like so it became friend to friend, and then we were like, okay, we're actually gonna like try to work together again, seriously. Like there was a reset moment, I remember,
Mm-hmm.
because I felt very guilty that like I wasn't making as much progress as he wanted,
Mm-hmm.
and he felt resentful towards me, and there was like a lot of like things that we had to tell to each other
Right.
at that point.
Right.
And so we told all those things to each other, and then we, the friendship grew,
Of
like
course.
teared up.
Uh, I can see that.
And
Yeah. True.
Also, I started like paying him
Mm-hmm.
at that point.
Mm-hmm. Was that just something
Uh,
to hold yourself accountable? Some sense of sacrifice?
it was part of that. Yeah, he really cared about that being like a thing that holds me accountable.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like I also like felt guilty for using all his time, so I was like at least I'm giving something to him
Yeah, of
because like at the end of the day, like his time is valuable, and
course. He could be
if I'm
charging.
just taking it like that.
He could be charging someone else the time that he's giving you. The time he's running the business as well, and everything. So, like, that was a really,
Yeah, of course.
really good move on your part in terms of that. I think it's something that people sometimes forget. Somebody invests a ton of time in you, and then you just like, okay, well, not going to do anything with any of that. You're a lot less
Hmm.
reluctant to invest the time again. Everybody wants a return on their investment, so um, yeah, that makes sense. That you're like at the very least, whatever the number was, I want to give something back to you that way.
Yeah. So I'm still broke, but I was very broke then too,
Mm-hmm.
and so I could only afford to pay him very little.
Right,
And but yeah, I still gave him something.
right. That helped with your guilt a bit too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or maybe not. I don't know.
No, no, no. It definitely did.
Okay.
So we would work together, and it would be more like of back to the old sessions, and we would have. Remember, we had a text document where we just would lay down the problems and then try to find solutions.
Right.
And it wasn't all women. In fact, it was very little about women because I was very resistant in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would just like improve the other things.
Okay.
So it was just like diet, gym, regular social interactions, family stuff.
Right. Mm. And what did you notice?
And so those things would improve.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got to the women thing again, and it was like it was just very difficult. And at that point, Julian was no longer like expecting something out of me. Like he didn't really want like progress out of me specifically. He was just like, "We'll do whatever you want to do," you know.
Mm-hmm.
It was just my place to say what we wanted to do, what I wanted to do.
Right. Mm. And what did you notice from that transition? That slight change?
So instead of being like, "Well, we gotta talk to women at all costs," it was more like I was just like, "Okay, I feel left out socially. What can I do to solve that problem?"
Okay. And so it felt more like you could go at your own pace.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it also I think it helped that everything was organized in like a text form.
Mm.
At that time, there was also I had like a spreadsheet
Mm-hmm.
where every day I would write down the things that I did that are good. So it helped a lot with like feeling guilty and negative
Mm-hmm.
because every day I would write down the good things that I did, so I could like firsthand see the good actions that I did.
Right. That makes sense. That's I don't know if he did a version of that's a tool we use with the monstrating, right? What did you
Okay.
notice? What did you do well? Um, and so I know I used that with him when we did the monstrating because I actually met Julian because he did the boot camp. And so that's how we became friends. And he's one of my best friends now. Uh,
Hmm.
and what's it called? But that came from that because it's very difficult in the beginning when you're learning something new to notice anything you're doing well. And so, which the reality is you're gonna suck, so it's easy to go like, it's just not for me, sort of like what you did when you were 14, because it's very rare we're taught that it's a not yet thing, not a not ever, right? And so it's like, okay, well, instead of thinking, because what players would do, they'd say, okay, Jam, we're gonna hop into coaching session, blah, blah, blah. And just because you're working with me, they think that things will skyrocket the first session afterwards. Sometimes it does, but I know that if you go about it in the typical way, so let's say you went up and spoke with a girl, if and she says fuck off, right? When you come back to me, I'm not gonna ask you what did you do wrong. You did everything wrong. Why? Because you don't know anything. Of course you're gonna do everything wrong, so to speak. You did 99% things wrong. But who cares? Tell me what you did right. And so what you did right was, I actually opened my mouth. Right. Okay, great. See if you can open your mouth 3 more times. And so you're going to get really good at that 1%. And you're still doing 99% wrong. But just really emphasizing the 1% and really getting good at the 1% you do. And what happens is gradually the 1% grows into 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to where you're doing 50% things right. Even though I never addressed anything you're doing wrong. Because now you're looking for what you're doing well versus looking at what you're doing wrong in the beginning, which is 9, and then you try to fix the 99% and ignoring the 1%. And so nobody's going to do that. You're going to give up way too early. So you have to focus on what you're doing well. I think he spoke to me about that around that time. I don't remember specifically, but I know that's something he had to do. And I'm really happy to hear it had a positive impact on you, because you're right. You have to focus on what you're, and not just like, some bullshit thing, like legitimate things. You're like, dang, that actually was a good thing today. I actually really did that. I showed up to the gym or whatever that was for you,
Yeah.
And so as you were documenting this stuff, you noticed a feeling change.
Yeah, for sure. I think it was a lot more geared to it. So instead of like being like, we are going to do so one figure I was introduced to by Julian, or you, maybe, I don't remember, is David Goggins. Right?
I introduced David Goggins to him, and I think I introduced Goggins to him. I don't remember, but I was a big Goggins guy because I work out a lot. So, yeah. Well, go ahead. I'm curious to hear what Tristan has to say about Goggins. He's very masculine in the way.
I was very, very. I felt very, I don't know, touched in a way.
Yeah.
Like I just really liked the Goggins character in the beginning, and it would always be like, yeah, I can fucking do it. Goggins ran however many miles with his fucking knees opening up or whatever, and it's like, yeah, if I surely I can walk to inside a clothing store.
Hey, that's one way to put it. I fuck with that.
And so if I can brute force walking into a clothing store, I can brute force anything.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
But that did not work out. Because I wasn't willing to brute force things, apparently.
This was after learning
and
about
so
Goggins?
At that...
Was this...
I knew about Goggins from the very beginning, working with Julian.
Oh, okay. So he introduced it really early.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was always like an overarching, philosophy for the way that we were working together. And it did not work out. And in those later moments, it would shift more to just something more. I don't really know how to put it, but like the goal of your gym session isn't to like blow your arms out. The goal of your gym session is to show up the next day, type of thing. And I felt like that was much more sustainable for me, at least. Like, I'm not saying one method is good or one method is wrong, and I think you're always in between those two, no matter what. And sometimes you're using the "I'm not going to go too hard" as an excuse. There's definitely something that happens. But if you try to go full Goggins the whole time, in my experience, it hasn't worked.
Right. Yeah, it's that's a whole other conversation, but I understand completely what you mean. Yeah, it's a whole different subject matter. Yeah, but no, it's not. Yeah, it's not a good long term. We breathe in and we breathe out. I'll just say that. If you hold your breath for too long, you die. Right? Which is why Goggins has a lot of physical injuries, because his body. The body is a real thing. Like, it's not like some imaginary device. And so, if it never breathes, it's gonna. But I respect what his intention is, which is just you can do a lot more than you think you can.
Hell yeah. So yeah, so I started going at my pace, and it was just more about the social part of the work that we were doing. It was more about like just talk to people, have a good time. Don't worry so much about like going out with girls. Like, who cares? And as I was doing that, there was a lot of girls that I was like, oh, like, it's reasonable to believe that this girl may be interested in me.
That sounds like him too.
What does it sound like?
I said that sounds like how he'd say it. It's reasonable to believe. I don't know if he used to say that prior, but that's a very
that's a Julian thing to say.
That's how he'd word it. I think he learned that from Jordan. No, or Alex Hermosa. One of them. But yeah, go ahead. That's besides the point.
Right. So those two are important too. But yeah, so I was like, okay, but I'm not willing to tell my feelings anymore. I'm done. I don't want to. I'm like, okay, she'll probably say yes, but like, I don't want to know. I'm not. Even if it's like 1%, she says no. I don't want to take the pain of the no.
Okay. So when did you finally break through? Because, what was the moment where you're like, oh shoot, like this new method is actually working? Like, what was there? What was that? You know what I mean? What was that key moment of like, this non-pressure method, maybe there's something to it?
Well, there was never really. I mean, okay, so I started getting more attention from women, right? And one girl specifically asked me out. And then we started dating.
Oh, really? So this was around the time of you not putting pressure on yourself anymore?
Yeah, it was like, yeah.
Okay. So how did you meet her? What was that about?
School.
So
most of the women that I would interact with would be through school.
So what give the audience, I mean, we've been invested in your story for almost 2 hours. You're like, oh, and by the way, I met a girl and started dating, and I'm like,
well, because that's kind of what happened.
But meaning, like, what?
Like,
how? Give us the play-by-play, because it's not even in your story. It doesn't sound like you've changed a huge amount from the "I'm not willing to express my feelings." So clearly something changed to where, like, you're saying you started dating as if you had never dated a girl prior to that, in other than the one from the beginning of the story. But like, like that's a huge jump, right? So
Well,
what happened? Yeah, how did you meet? How did you get from?
so I told Julian like, oh, I'm talking to girls,
And
and it's cool. And he was like, okay, well, you should probably. Are you? He was like, he stopped saying you should do this at that point, and he was like, okay, well, what do you want to do about it?
mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't want to like tell them I'm interested in them.
Okay.
He's like, well, okay, what could you do? And the what we ended on was like, well, you should try to become friends with these girls.
Mm. And then what did you do?
I just tried to become friends with these people.
And that was one of them was like the girl that you were dating, started dating.
Yeah.
So how did y'all meet?
Yeah.
And then how did that escalate to that point?
School.
Tristan, we're not in school. Like that's where. That's not a how. Like,
how? Well, she was in my class. That's it.
Okay. I'll show you.
She was just like
I'll explain to you what somebody means when they say that. So if you ask me how did Julian and I meet, I could say the internet. That's one level of an answer, right?
Right.
I could say, oh, he was a trainee of mine. That's one level of an answer. I could say, oh, we did a session, hit it off, and then that's up. Or I could say that, oh yeah, we were in on the first call. We ended up not even talking, but like within 5 minutes, we ended up not talking about Mon stuff. We hit it off and we started talking about things unrelated to Mon's. We actually were talking about girls. He was building this program out, and then I had never met somebody before that knew anything about the women stuff, and he knew way more than he should have known. And so I got curious about that, and so I was like, "Yo, we can." And so after that, all our calls, we had a separate call other than the Pokemon call, where I'd show him how to break down the women stuff for the program he was working on, and blah blah blah. So that's how me and Julian actually met, right? So if I just say, "Oh, we met on the internet," that doesn't give any real, right? So if I'm saying, if you say
maybe I can do a better job
in class, it's like that's a really shitty payoff for the audience if they made it this far. Like, oh, okay,
right. Well, I mean, there isn't. I wish there was like a Goggins like breakthrough that I could give you, but there
not
isn't.
A breakthrough. We're saying like you're saying you started being friends with these girls, and then you go, okay, and then I met a girl and started dating. I'm like, so who is this? Like, what is the situation? Why her? What was different about her? Why you dated her instead? Like, what is the?
Well, I was friends with this girl like for the whole like school year, kind of.
This girl, right? The one that you started dating.
Yes.
Okay.
And then as the school year ended, she was like, "Do you want to like grab a drink together?"
Okay, that's better, right?
And that's it.
You were doing so well, and you went back to the same old. And so you grabbed a drink together, and you just magically started dating.
Yeah, pretty much, honestly.
So nothing happened. So you just snapped your fingers, and from the drink, y'all were together. So you guys didn't speak. There was no conversation.
We did speak.
I mean, clearly not.
There was no conversation. It just happened magically.
I mean, that's how you make the story sound. Like, you grabbed a drink. Like, what happened?
Fair enough.
You're acting as if you were going on dates nonstop, and this was just a regular thing. Like,
No.
then what happened?
Then she made it clear that she was interested in me. I said I was interested too,
Okay.
and that's about it.
And so you guys, that was all of the conversation you had, and then you started dating.
No, there was a lot more, but I can't, like...
You can't what? You don't have to go into the conversation, but like what? So you just magically thought, okay, you know, this whole time I thought there was no one for me. A girl showed interest, and all of the insecurities and things that I had before magically disappeared. And I was like, you know, I'm a man now, and like, what happened, Tristan?
Mhm.
Like nobody knows. Again, last part of the story, you're still like a slightly
Well,
different version of the
as
same
far as...
guy.
Mm-hmm.
So how you go from
Well,
that to you're dating a girl now?
I don't have a great explanation,
So you have no
is the thing.
idea
It's like,
what happened to yourself. Julian and you had no conversation, nothing.
I was just like, when it happened, I was just like, what, like, why is it happening and why now? I didn't do anything, like, for it. I was very confused.
So you're sincerely, like, from your point of view, all that you remember is that this random girl, not random, but you know, like this girl
Mm.
for some reason is interested in me. Can't understand why. Then she asks me out. Can't understand why. Then you show up there, and she states that she is attracted to you. Can't understand why. You're like, okay, I guess I'm attracted to you too. And then you're like, okay, I guess we're gonna date now, and y'all start dating. Is that your memory of it?
Honestly, more or less, yeah.
It's terrible. But I can't be mad at you if that, you know, it's funny because I'm like, right, damn, like Tristan a year ago. I mean, this is so much growth. It's not even funny. Like this is, of course, he's not gonna know how to fucking articulate or understand the inner workings of a woman's mind. Like you haven't. We were just getting you from in the negatives. Like you know, if you have zero, you have plus, and you're in the negatives, right? And
Mm.
so we got you to zero. Julian working with you, and then now you're starting to be in the positives. But doesn't mean you're at a fucking, you know, 25 over a zero. You're still like still growing and understanding and learning. So that's on me.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, my apologies, audience. I was expecting Tristan to be a 1400, 1500 level shark when he admitted like I'm not. I don't think I'm that much above 1100 still, but you know I have a girlfriend now, pretty much. So I'm not 1000 anymore. But you know, I still have a lot to learn on my way up. Was that
Yeah,
was
for
that
sure.
accurate?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
And so around this time with a girlfriend, I'm guessing the masturbation has slowed down at least somewhat.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. And so now you're dating and whatnot, and that's where you are now.
That's where I am now. Like, I'm sorry there isn't a better payoff than that.
I mean, that is the payoff. I just don't think you're describing it very well. That's all. But you can't do more than what you can do. It's sort of like you were able to describe and articulate when you were going through all that stuff very well, which makes sense because you know I think that was very familiar. It was a place you were for a long time. How long have you been dating this girl?
A couple months.
Right. And so the idea of having a woman that's in your life on a continual basis wants to remain there. I'm sure, you know, you've at least kissed her by now. So
Yes.
I don't like just, you know, Debbie haven't kissed her yet, right? So I'm sure you guys are progressing or have progressed way beyond kissing at this point. So, you know, it's, you know, I think but maybe somebody in the audience can resonate more with you, and that's the usefulness, right? In terms of like, I mean, if I can just get there, I'd be set. And I'm projecting my like Tristan, come on, there's got to be more to the story, and in your world, you're like, I don't know.
Well, like, yeah, that's what the story is, dude. Like, I improved things in my life, and eventually, I stopped caring as much about it, and it just happened.
Interesting.
That's the best explanation I have.
I'm curious to hear what Julian's gonna think of this part. There's like, I wonder if that's how he pictures this as well. Or is like just this, the way you'd make it sound is very happenstance. Like, I feel like I'm the same guy. I don't know why this would have happened now versus, you know, any time before in my life.
I mean, I did improve a lot, like in as far as like emotional control and that kind of thing.
Which is why this doesn't seem. I think what it is because we're on the other side. It's like we're like, did you forget what you were like? How do you think this is random? Right? Like
it's random. Obviously, it's not random.
Right. You're night and day from Tristan a year and a half ago. Right. I don't know why, you know. So I think that was what threw me off. It's like, bro, have you not noticed? It's sort of like a guy who's benching like some crazy number now, and he's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, dude, you couldn't lift the bar a year and a half ago. Like, because maybe he's comparing himself to the guy who's benching 4 plates or something. It's like, dude, you know. But no, yeah, I'm actually really happy because your story more so than even what happened. I'm glad that there was a silver lining. But I remember when Julian would share things, I was like, damn. I'd always go like, damn. Tristan was a subscriber of mine. Like I became so used to hearing about you through him that I forgot that there was a time where you didn't know him. Like it made it sound like you were someone I was hearing about that I've never met. And I had to remind myself like, oh shit, Tristan was my subscriber. And why that's so valuable is that who else is buying the avatar right now that would, like, you know what I mean? In moments where I'm like, should I make this post? Should I not make this post? Does anybody care? Should I just, and had I not said fuck it, whatever I said in that post would not have reached you. You know what I mean? And you'd still be in that place, if not worse. God forbid. So it's one of those things that gives inspiration of like, you know, Jam, you know, it might not get 100 comments.
You know,
go ahead.
I don't actually think I would still be in that place. I think I was improving regardless. I think obviously I'm very, very grateful that you helped me, that you were part of the journey. That's like really awesome. That's like something that can happen on Earth. But yeah.
So where would you think? Where
like
do you think
it's not like if you don't make the post, the person's life is not going to change. It's always changing, I think.
Well, that's I think, what's the word for that?
Now people do get stuck. That's like something that happens.
Well, this is the end of the podcast. If you think that's truth, I'll just let you think that. Because what I was gonna say is there's no evidence to back up what you just said. Right? So that's just like a stake in the ground statement. Because there's no way. Not let's take your life out of it, and just use a completely different example of someone. There's no way to know what a person's life would have been. It's really easy to go like, well, no, I would have been, like, just say somebody happened to be at the right place, right time to stop somebody from, they were on the brink of whatever. And they happened to see a video of something that person posted that was specifically about, actually, let's use a real example. Let's say whoever is listening to this right now was about to take a fucking jar of pills, right? Or they were trending there, or they're in a place where, whatever. To say, well, if this video was not watched, they would have been fine anyway. There's no way to prove that. And so...
Oh, of course not.
And so be very careful about that, because when you say things like that, one, it gives the excuse to not take action now, because you're like, well, if you didn't make the post and I didn't make the comment, then I would have still been, quote unquote, fine, whatever you think that means. Anyway. And so it's like, okay, well, that invalidates in some sense the part I did, the part you did, and the part Julian did. And so if you think in that way, then it actually invalidates almost anything ever. There's like, oh, well, and then everything in the future you'll ever do. It's like, well, it'll work out because it was whatever reason you thought it was. Always, it would have worked out. So it doesn't really matter what choices I make, because it'll all work out. But that's like literally not true. If you make a bunch of poor choices continually, it won't work out. Definitionally.
Yeah, of course.
So you have to be on a trend of making better choices, or else free will, and maybe that's what you're saying, free will doesn't play a factor. Like, if everybody on Earth just kind of succumbs to complacency and like, oh, I could make this supposed to be a better thing, but I could also not. I could write this book.
No, I absolutely think you should make the post.
But
that's not what I'm saying.
You're saying that in your particular case. I know what you're saying in your particular case. Things were already on an upward trajectory, so. But in the moment you said, well, whether you make the post or not, that's the part I'm addressing. You're saying, oh, it's not like if you didn't make the post. Go ahead.
Like, I'm very grateful that you made the post. It's almost like mystical or spiritual in a way, the way that it happened. Like, there are a lot of instances like that in my life where I've met people and they were just the right person at the right time, and it just completely, like, improved my life.
Yeah. And this isn't about me and you or conversation, because when you said that, I was like, I could address this, but I thought about it. I'm like, well, if there's anybody listening that has that same thought, what would be the worst of the two? To say, okay, well, it'll take too much time to unpack this, or to go, you can think what you want to, like, and so that's how at least for me, I go through my decisions. Go ahead.
I think this is a hard enough listen already that people are gonna listen. In my opinion.
100%. 100%.
People are made it to this point, they can sit through us arguing about this. I think
that's the thing about it. I was like, the thing is, whenever there are two people having, so let's say you're like, the sky is blue and the sky is pink, and I say the sky is pink. If by the time I may know, well, it's gonna take 20 minutes for for the evidence of the sky is blue or pink to be like, okay, oh, okay, that those are the realities for why that's the case. And so it's like, okay, do I do the 20 minutes? Because that does make a big difference. And it's somewhat separate from the point of the podcast. But then that's when that moment came of like, okay, well, if there is one person more for my audience than for us, I don't care if you actually think that. So I just want to put, I could give less of a fuck about that. It was more like, okay, if there's somebody, if you thought that, that's a dangerous thought to have, right? The implications of that is that, well, you know, and so I'm like, whoa, like that's a dangerous thought to have. So if anybody in the audience has that thought, whether I change your mind, quote unquote, or not is irrelevant. But if anybody else in my audience, because I care about my audience deeply, has that thought, I just want to share with them, like, be very wary of thinking what you do does not matter. Because those are a big part of why a lot of tragedies happen is because people think that. They think, okay, well, what do I mean, I don't have any power. And so if enough people think that, then you can have tyranny where there's one person or a couple small group of people, because all the masses think they're powerless. And so I'm like, whoa, that's an insidious thing. Well, that's not what I think you meant. I was like,
I absolutely think that whatever you do matters.
Yeah.
So maybe what I said betrayed some thought that's negative.
I wasn't sure what you meant.
What did I say exactly? What did I say exactly? Do you remember?
Yeah, you were saying that I was relaying back how much when I was relaying back how.
And I was like, oh, if you didn't make the post,
yeah, you're like
it's not
my life would have been fine anyway. That was and so
which is like, what I'm trying to say is like, if you didn't make the post, the universe would have continued working.
Oh, 100%. 100%. In that sense,
but
yes.
Obviously, I'm very, very glad that you made the post, and like you literally changed my life, dude. Like you made a considerable positive impact in my life, and it's awesome that you did that, and you did it for other people, it seems, and that's really, really great. And please keep making posts.
Oh, for sure. I can't if I wanted to stop. But more to the point, and I appreciate that, but more to the point, because that's not just to make it like, it wasn't like, oh man, Tristan, you're unappreciated. I don't give a, like, as long as you got the benefit, like, I don't need the praise. So that's not like a thing for me. It was just like the thing of like, you said something very wise there. You said the universe would have kept working, right? Universe, God, whatever version of that, so everybody can understand, which is basically that. It's not like if you don't do the thing, like if you have one moment you didn't follow through to speak to that girl, your life is over or something like that. There's no other opportunity ever. You need to beat yourself to death. That's not what I'm suggesting. So I don't know if you thought maybe I was saying like you were trying to be encouraging and like, damn, you know, if there's a post you didn't make, it's not like life is over, right? Like or my life would have just ended on that moment. Sometimes it's hard to say because, like, you know, see a kid.
Yeah, there's probably, it might make a difference for someone. That's for sure.
Like this post might be something that stops someone from actually taking their life. Oh, damn, I was really about to do it.
And it definitely made a difference for me, and it definitely like transformed my life. And like, who knows what would have happened? There's like really no way to tell.
So I was hoping that someone listening would be like, yo, bros, I know like you're thinking, because you know what you made me realize just now? My reluctance to let that slide was, I know there's a guy right now going, I want to reach out.
Yeah, it doesn't fucking matter anyway. It doesn't matter anyway.
And he's like, oh, I was, you know, before he said that, I was going to reach out to somebody. But I guess he has a point. I'm going to be fine anyway, so I don't have to do it right now. I can do it. The universe is going to keep working. I can do it next year. And that is dangerous, because it's like, I don't have to address this right now. I can wait another year. I can wait another 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then
Yeah,
that becomes
you're right.
dangerous.
You're right. Yeah, I didn't realize my comment was driving people in that direction. That's yeah.
So that's it. It wasn't like you
Yeah.
per se. It's more like, oh shoot, I know guys who are like looking for an excuse. You're at the point where you're like, you were already out, but there are people who are looking for a reason to stay where they're at. And your whole story inspired them, and then like right at the end, it's like, my, it wouldn't have made that. It's like, oh no, guys, like, do not wait 6 more weeks, right? Like, it does matter if you wait 6 weeks. It does. It does matter if you waste another year.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Of course. And I think there was a point where I believed that I was fucked anyway, so why would I bother? And changing that belief was definitely like a big turning point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't want your story to go to waste in that way. I'm like, no. You came this far, and you like, don't let that like make you not message somebody, or like whoever that may be. You may want to work with Julian now or some shit. Like, oh damn, I guess I don't have to work with Julian if he said he would have been fine anyway. You know what I mean? Something like that.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I don't want Julian, if he heard that, to feel like, well, damn, Tristan, like the amount of times, like the amount of time I didn't put into you, I didn't want it to sound like a spit in the face.
I think we're cool with Julian. I don't think, like, I don't know. He's felt that way before. He's told me about it. We worked it out. Like
cool.
Like Julian knows I'm eternally grateful to him, so I'm not too worried about his feelings on that specific comment.
Okay, perfect. All right. It's been a while since I chopped it up with you, so it's like, Julian knows you far more intimately, and we're technically having a three-way call right now, which is the audience, me and you.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, Julian would have definitely beaten me up about that comment as well, so I understand.
But any genuine final words for anybody that, like, I was gonna say, if there's if you were talking to Tristan, like, if Tristan from back then was listening to this, what would you say to him? But like, really, anything that comes to your heart, like, what do you actually want to say to someone? Because somebody's made it this far, somebody's listening, and like, somebody needs to hear whatever the fuck you gotta say, even if you have nothing to say.
Yeah. So I guess so you're gonna be fine. It doesn't mean you should sit on your ass, but you're gonna be fine. Like, seriously. I think that's what my old self would have needed to hear.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, like, what you do matters. Everything you do matters, literally. And because if you believe that what you do doesn't matter, it's just a lose-lose.
Yeah.
You don't get anything out of it.
Yeah.
Like, there's a Jordan Peterson video on it that I watched like 15 times.
Mm-hmm. I know the one you're talking about. That's when
you said Julian made me watch 15 times.
It's funny. I sent him that video. He told me he lets you watch it 50. So I sent it to him for him, and then he's like, "Holy shit, I'm gonna have Tristan watch this." I remember that he told me this was in early this year. It was like January or something like that. He was like,
"Yeah,"
and you wrote down what you learned or something like that, right?
Yeah, he made me do essays about it.
I remember that. Everything you do matters. So would that be the final word?
And be positive. Be positive. Those are the two major shifts that happened this year, I think.
Yeah.
What you do matters, and be positive. Whatever it is, you could choose. Let's say you just passed an exam. If you spend the whole week waiting for your grade, and you choose to believe that, oh, your grade's going to be awful, bro, your grade's probably going to be awful, and you're going to have a terrible week. And at the end of the day, if the grade isn't like you can't change the grade anyway. So if you technically you can't. You can choose to believe that you can. It's fine. But if you believe that the grade is going to be good, I just aced it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about it. Like you're definitely going to have a better week, dude. And that's going to make it a big change in the long run if you start to believe like this, if you start to think like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So if you're sitting there at home and you're like, yeah, my life is fucked. I can't change that belief in you. But maybe you should try to think that like you're gonna have a good day today, or that find something to look forward to in that day, and not jerking off, something else.
It's a slow step, as you say. Sometimes you just gotta walk in the clothing store and run back out. So if that's the best you can do right now, that's the best you can do. Like, better than, as you said, jerking off all that.
Yeah. If you got problems, you gotta talk. You gotta talk. It's like what my magnetizer says is you got a problem? Okay, just like let's put it down. You don't have to carry it. Just put it down.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you talk about your problems.
Yeah.
It leaves your body. It's just you put it down on the floor.
I like that. All right. This was a great episode. I appreciate your transparency, and it's just like how that Charles episode. Charles had no idea when he decided to reach out to stop. He had a porn thing at the time, as you know. He had no idea he'd have turned things around for himself so much to where he's on the pod, and you were in the audience, and so that little seed may have been the thing that made you talk about the girl thing on the YouTube comment, and now you're on the pod. Right? You still have a lot of growth to do, as you say, right? But you're no longer the guy who's crying. You're the guy now that actually has somebody that wants to be with him, right? And so,
yeah, I don't know the last time that I've been scared of a person just in a social situation. I don't know the last time that I cried.
Right.
I actually don't know.
Which is insane. 2 years straight, and you can't even remember, like. And so, from the guy who, again, a year and a half ago, like I had to wait 10 days because it's like, oh man, I've been crying and to I can't even remember. Like, that's a huge win, dude. I mean, like, my voice doesn't change when I'm like, Julian has really high inflections. He'd get really excited. You can hear my voice sounds the same. I could have just won the lottery or some shit, and my voice.
Julian gets really excited. I don't know how he does it.
So I don't have that vocal inflection, so you won't be able to tell from what I'm saying. But like, I'll say something over and over again whenever I'm really trying to get it by. But I mean, that's huge, bro. So,
yeah, Julian thinks he's Naruto. So he got a scream.
That's my guy. But nah, that's massive, bro. And so I know somebody else is in the audience right now, and this is gonna be the one episode that says, you know what? Fuck it. And they're gonna make the change.
Yeah. If it makes one person do any small action, I'm really glad. Mm-hmm. And hopefully it's more than a small action.
It will. So this episode will cause somebody else to be on the podcast. And they're gonna go, it's actually your episode you did with Tristan that caused the and then we're gonna see what stories develop out of that. And so these don't get the thousands of views, but I know there are a couple hundred people that this is exactly for. That's gonna make all the difference. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share, bro. Guys, please comment down below your favorite part, any part that touched you. If you made it this far, I'd love to hear. And with that concludes this episode. Peace.